Okay, the car is coding knock sensor trouble code and gets into limp mode. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna recheck the cam timing. So in order to do so, I'm gonna remove all this thing here. I'm gonna remove the cabin air filter and the lower part of it. Gonna tape the holes to prevent stuff to get in there. I'm gonna remove also this engine cover, air filter box, and this thing here. The idea is to go down there and remove the intake manifold, because this is where we gotta locate the crankshaft properly. Okay, time to remove the intake manifold. There's a bracket here that stands in the way. Let me try to show you. No, it's not easy to show. Okay, you see there's a bolt there. That bolt, it's a E-socket, holds a bracket. The bracket goes for this wire here, and there's another wire underneath. I'm gonna unscrew it from the block, engine block, because this is the area we want to look for to locate the top dead center cylinder 1 with the pin. There's a plastic hole that is plugged there, so we're gonna need to access that hole and move out the plastic plug. So that's what I'm up to now. So that's the tool I use to reach that bolt. A wrench with a hexagonal square 3/8" adapter. Socket is E8. Telling you because it's very hard to reach. The extension, I just used it when I was removing the bolt by hand to have a bit of grip. And this is the bolt we're looking for. Okay, so you have this. It's hard to see where the pin is. I'm gonna try to show you. Okay, so here at the tip of the screwdriver, here what you have is the oil pan gasket level. I'm on the driver's side, close to I would say in line with cylinder number 5 at the moment. So this is the gasket of the oil pan. This is the engine support. You got a ridge here, and there is another one here. So in between these two ridges, close to the one on top, close to that side, meaning the flange that stick to the transmission on the top. So you got the two ridges on the top here, close to the wall, where you got the L shape in the corner there. This is where you have the this plastic plug. Okay, and on the top, above the higher ridge, which is here, you have the starter area and the knock, not the knock sensor, but the crank sensor. So if you go down to the crank sensor, you will find this aluminum ridge just like this one here. Same thing as this. So, but on the far side, close to the transmission. I'll try to show you what it looks like with a mirror. It's going to be a hard thing, but I'll try to get there. So it's a bit hard to see, but this is a mirror, right? If you look, there is a yellow thing in the corner. That is the plastic thing we're trying to get. So we have to reach that plastic thing, and we have to slide it out this way. So it's a bit tricky. I'll try to reach there with a screwdriver, maybe a small screwdriver, to get in the hole, and I'll show you what it looks like. So if you look in your kit, locating kit, you got pins, one like that and one like that. So it's one of these pins that's gonna have to slide inside the gonna have to slide like that inside the flywheel through the flange on the engine block. Now that we know where the pin is, we're gonna need to make sure in what position the engine is, and in order to do so we'll have to remove the valve cover, cylinder head cover, and I will have to remove all the fuel lines. I have to remove all the coil packs. I will remove also this track from here. Also, I'm gonna have to remove this vent hose here. Unclip it from there. That should be enough, or maybe both here and there. Make sure not to break it. Besides that, remove the track, these two bolts here, here, and there. Put that track aside, and in order to be able to pull up that thing, I'm gonna need to loosen up these bolts here on the side of the fuel rail. That will move them aside, and that will allow for the cylinder cover to move aside to clear the fuel injectors while I'm gonna try to pull that thing up. Don't forget to remove the nuts for the grounds. There's 3 of those along this track. The valve cover, they are there, right there, these nuts. Also need to unplug the injectors. There are 6 of those connectors. I'm also gonna need to remove the wire for the oxygen sensor, or like squeeze. There's like a little space that you just push them, so now it's going to be a matter of following these cables along the back of the cylinder head cover, and it's like a triangle piece that is on the far hand, and there's a space in between the valve cover and that little triangle, so just pull the wire out. It's just to grip them. So there's 2 of those spaces, one around here, the other one around here. Removing the vacuum accumulator, the idea being so much to move these hoses that are at the bottom, not the one on top but the one at the bottom, so that they can clear the intake, not the intake but the valve cover. In order to be able to put that electrical track aside along the engine, I'm going to remove the valve bracket that I call this angle shape here, to free them from this vacuum bracket, vacuum hose, same thing. So now you're good to remove this thing. I also took out the 2 bolts here on the expansion tank. They're just to have some room. Remove the connector. Be careful not to bang that thing because you don't want to break it. So I'm going to remove the angle vacuum valve bracket. I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to swing that thing, the electrical rail kind of thing, I'm going to swing it along the side of the engine, and then I'm going to put back that thing in its stud here, and the rubber grommet there, to make sure it's not going to be damaged, maybe even putting the bolts back on. And then this valve cover should be good to remove. So this is what it looks like when you put that rail aside. It's along the engine like that, as you can see. You kind of need to take it, and it's like you flip it down a bit, but you have like to pull it in order to and check your wiring that goes on the back. There's a wire that goes all the way on the back, this one here. So you want to kind of get a bit of loose on that thing, so the fuel rail is loose, just loose enough, so you'll be able to move it around. Well, now time to remove all the bolts all around. You need to remove those bolts here all around. They go all around like that, they go back in the middle. Also you need to remove the long bolts here where the nuts for the grounds. So So you can tell there's bolt all around that thing. On it's like a U shape kind of for the bolt pattern. It goes around here, then come back here, then along here, and on the way here, and all up front. So now that you saw the the electric rail that was there, I'm gonna set the expansion tank back to its position, and it's time to remove the valve cover. Before you remove the valve cover, right now all my bolts are loosened up except the one on front. You want to spray compressed air to remove all of the debris that could be there. Maybe don't do it with 100 psi, maybe with like something like 30-50 is plenty good enough, where safety goggles also. Then it's time to remove, could have done that earlier in the process, but time to remove the radiator fan. Okay, the reason why you gotta loosen up the fuel rail is because this section here, this part, kind of gets stuck. The fuel injector here on that side, it's the same thing as here. So the valve cover is kind of stuck underneath, so you need to push it a bit that way in order to pull it. The other thing with the valve cover is very often you think your bolts are loose and they're not, so you have like to wiggle it a bit, and you will see some bolts you have to play around trying to figure out which one is still stuck. So what I have here, I just have it partly removed. I just want to show you. This is the jig actually to do your timing. So this is going to be set here where the valve cover sits, and you can see the pins here. This one and the other one on the other side, they're the pins matching these holes. The holes that are there, you can see the hole here and the other one here. So what's going on at this moment is that the crankshafts are not at the right spot, which we could have guessed because it takes a bit of a luck to be right onto it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the crankshaft to get them close by where they have to go, but I'll stop shy a bit because I want to have a chance to set the pin on the crankshaft. And the thing is, you need to turn 2 turns of crankshaft in order to make 2 turns up there. So the idea is you have to turn that thing clockwise only. So this is why I want to stop shy. I want to make sure that I'm not going to overshoot for my pin. That is, remember, on that side there underneath the ridge where is the starter. So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to turn this thing prior to remove the valve cover completely. There's no need for that. Right now I just want to have the pins maybe like flush to the surface here, or maybe slightly before it. It doesn't really matter. I just want to make sure I'm shy. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And this is the reason why we had to remove the radiator, because obviously it's going to make my life much easier to access the crankshaft pulley down there. So this is how I set them. And I confirm to you, you have to remove this thing here in order to remove the brace, strut tower brace here. Otherwise you won't be able to remove your valve cover. So that you just turn a little like that. And you got the Torx bolt here as well as one here. So I'm up to this thing to remove that right away. By the way, if your valve cover kind of stick to the surface, you use a rubber hammer, try to hit like on a corner, gentle all around, and it should unstick from one side and you should be able to pull it out. The other thing is that thing here, that corner there tends to fall into this aluminum hose for the AC. So when you're trying to pull that thing out, you're gonna have to clear that thing also. So that's basically what there is to it. So removing it finally. We've been listening to the engine while it was running with a stethoscope, mechanical stethoscope, and putting the probe around cylinder 3 and 4. This is where the sound was the strongest. No surprise why. No surprise why when we look at looking for the knock sensor problem. For some reason that I cannot explain, this thing here is sideways to the valve on cylinder number 3 on the exhaust side, so I'm gonna have to remove the cam and try to see how come this thing fell off beside it, and that seems to be the reason why I got this problem of the knock sensor code. So this is the plastic pin that was plugging the hole for the crankshaft. It's inserted like that. So that was the part we were able to see with the mirror. Use the flat screwdriver and my fingers to try to figure out where it is, because you can not really see where it is, but you can easily feel it with your fingers. So now this is the pin I'm going to try to fit in there. I'm going to put back my socket 22mm on the crank pulley down there. And with one hand, with my left hand, I'm going to try to turn it clockwise as I'm trying to pull the pin on the other side where it goes. And I go gently. I'm trying not to remove my spark plugs because I like to keep the seal original for as long as I can, but when you do such a thing, you build pressure, so it might be much easier to remove the spark plug. So if you're good with it, just proceed as such. It's gonna make your life easier, because then you won't have pressure. And the problem with the pressure, you might encounter a point where it tends to like get free and kick, so you have to be very careful if you keep your spark plugs in. So that's what I'm up to now, trying to put that pin on the cranks. Also, you can see here there are flats, so now the flats are tilted like that. They have to become straight, but now it's not my concern really, both of them. This is because we are a bit back, like shy to the mark of the crank. Once the crank's going to be in place, these should be straight up. When you do the timing, basically what you do is you set your crankshaft at the right spot with that pin. So it's the top dead center that is the reference for this engine. So maybe it's not exactly the top dead center how you would highball it, but it is with the way this engine is supposed to be. Then you have to get these two flats straight up. So once you do that, you have both cranks, both cams and the crank all in good relationship between each other. These both, if you remove, you need to replace them. And basically this is one, this bolt is loose, this is not connected normally to the cams. It's locked in place with some cones, taper. So when you bolt it on, it locks in. This is the Vanos thing. This isn't that thing that it will advance or retard with hydraulic pressure. So basically what you do when you and they are mandatory to be where they belong. So you got IN for intake, EX for exhaust, and then what you do when you do the timing is you lock the cams and the crank together with that pin, and then you will locate these signal plates here. These works with the cam sensor. You can see the sensor right there. So and it's with these pins there and the jig that you saw earlier that you make sure that everything is in relationship. The only thing that you don't really mind is that thing. It doesn't really matter where it sits, how it goes. So the goal right now is to put the pin on the crankshaft. Forgot to mention, but if you're not sure, because these jig, obviously you can turn your crankshaft half a turn and it was still align. So you should look on the inside there. The head shape has got a point toward, the intake one's got a point toward like that, and the exhaust one's gonna point down toward like that. So you can see where the chain is, that chain down there. This is the chain hanging from the locking pin for the crankshaft. So you can see the tip of it, the black thing. The pin, I mean, is when you push it, it really has to go in a hole. So once you're in, you shouldn't be able to move either direction. And this is a very good visual for you to know if you're close to the top dead center. Now that everything is, the crank is at this position right now, so I need to hook up the jig here with this to lock the cams in place. That's what I'm going to do right now. So getting ready to hook up the jig. Of course, you want to go gentle, you don't want to damage the aluminum surface. This thing's got a bolt on with the cylinder valve cover bolts, holes. Since the jig can move a bit because the holes are way bigger than these bolts, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to line up these bolts already. This one I need to turn the cam a little bit. For now, just pick up the loose. That should be good enough. Now let's torque these again, just a little. So now the loose is picked up here. And just torque these. Okay, once this is done, it's going to be time to remove these bolts and put the new ones in place. Then we're going to line up these discs here properly, as they should, with the jig. And then it's going to be time to retorque these two guys. So now these sprockets are on the cam. The bolts are not torqued. These are the old ones. So what I'm intending to do is I'm not going to apply the real torque for now. I kind of want to make one turn with this thing to see how it goes. So I'm going to remove these. I'm going to set the timing properly, put the new bolts in place. And I'm gonna torque the new bolts for a test at 30 foot-pound. This is gonna be enough for it to just hold this whole thing at as one unit to make this one turn of cams to see if the timing's still good. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna set this whole thing for that. So I'm gonna remove the old bolts. I don't mind so much with this gear. The sensor reading plate for now, it's not a big thing. It's much more the cam and the crank that I want to check if it's going to line up properly, and make sure turning slowly if nothing's kind of bangs. If I feel like it's not turning properly, it's probably a valve that is not properly in line. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So taking out the old bolt, This sprocket seems to be in place, not moving at all. When it's hard to turn, it's because the sprocket is off his thing. Now time to put the new bolt in place. So at this moment it's just a matter of picking up the loose so the sprocket won't fall off. Just want a bit of loose so we can line up this plate here later on if it works fine. New bolt ready. Either way, the plates for the signal of the sensor, they're both alike. You can swap them all around, no problem. It's the sprocket that cannot be switched around. Now it's a matter to try to locate these plates properly with the jig. So these black pins, they go inside the holes. There's two of those. 1, 2. You line them up with these sensor plate. Okay, once they're in, you bolt that thing in place, and then the other one here at the bottom, same thing, bolt that in place. What I'm gonna do now is just start them a little with the ratchet. Once this is done, now I'm gonna torque the bolt that goes in the middle here, that links the plate and the sprocket and the cam together. I'm gonna torque those at 35 foot-pound, even though it's the new bolt. That shouldn't be a yield stress deformation of the bolt. That should be plenty enough, 30, 35. Once they are torqued, then I'm going to remove this blue jig. I'm gonna remove these two things that gets in the cam. Gonna remove the pin that is in the crank. Then I'm gonna make one turn of the cam and recheck with the jig to see how this whole thing fits. So right now I'm gonna fit this, and I'm gonna do my 2 turns and we'll see how it goes. So blue jig has been removed, tabs are removed, this pin is removed. So now it's time to turn this crank, 1 turn, and see how this thing is gonna go. So now it's time to turn that thing. The pin has been removed, obviously, and the front jig and the jigs are removed for the cams. So now it's time to turn and feel it. We also have the screwdriver that's still gonna high witness. If we have the top dead center. Make sure the cam turns when you turn, as we're not at the full torque. So we probably are close to one turn of crank, because the screwdriver is going back up, which makes sense because we're close to half a turn on the cams. So far so good. The thing seems to be offering resistance. So we will have to stop shy once again at the top dead center, because we have to insert that pin again on the crank. So now cylinder 1 is going up. Okay, from that point on, I'm gonna get ready for the pin. So far looks good, but we will recheck with the jigs and all. So now it's a matter of resetting the pin to lock the crank. Once this is done, I'm gonna reset the jigs in the cam, both places, and here on the pins on these plates for the sensor, making sure everything's fine. If everything lines up, then we're gonna loosen up these bolts and torque with the proper specs. Getting the pin in is that's the job, man. I'm gonna tell you, this is where it happens. Once you got the pin in, I'm able to put the jig back into place, so that means that was perfect. So what I did is I retorqued the entire set of jig, make sure this is torqued, this, and the blue one as well. Just slightly loosen up these two bolts. Now I'm gonna torque this thing for real. So each bolt, they have to go 177 pound-inch, and then you had 180 degree, and this is done deal. Then it's gonna be a matter of removing jigs, removing the pin on the crank, and building that thing back up. So first level of torque done. Now that both bolts are torqued, the 180 degree is done also. First step would be to remove the pin on the crank, put that thing back, so this way we don't forget about it. So that's what I'm gonna do right now, and right after that I'm gonna remove the jig, blue and this black thing here. So first off, the pin on the crank. So jig's been removed, took the screwdriver out, put the spark plug back in, torqued it. So now it's time to remove these rags, put the cylinder head cover, and torque all the bolts. Remember to you got to move that aside in order to clear the fuel injectors. So that's what I'm up to. Okay, so set the valve cover in place. This part here still is the biggest interference you're gonna find to fit. Then it's gonna be the fuel rail in order to clear the injectors. Once the valve cover sits in place, you want to make sure that there's no wiring that is getting squeezed in between the valve cover and the cylinder head. So check around. Once this is good, Tied up all the bolts, pick up all the loose. Once you're done with that, then you start torquing from the middle. So you go from the middle, let's say here, like that, and then you go forward, further out, and then you go side to side, further out all the time. Torque I found for that, always double check on your hand. For torques and specs, it's 75 pound-inch. 75 pound-inch, that's what I found. Also, I torqued these when they were due to sequence, but what I did is I torqued this one, skipped this one, and did this one, did the forehand, and then I did this one in the last moment. These one, my socket kind of gets squeezed, so I use the flat screwdriver, either pry it a bit like that or like that. I'm lucky enough that my sockets got lines, so I can get grip. It's possible you might have a socket that kind of squeeze in there. So for these, so you'll figure it out what to do with that. So now I'm up to get this fuel rail in place, but first off I want to get these vacuum lines underneath it, because now I got a bit of room to play for. So I'm gonna put them underneath here, all above, then I'm gonna slide them back in where they belong, torque the fuel rail, gonna get the electrical rail on top, and this is the steps I'm up to. Fuel pump fuse is in place, no leaks. So now it's time to hook up these ground to these studs with the little nuts that goes on top of them. Connect the fuel injector